An alleged abduction ending in an SIU investigation.
Inside the vehicle was a man's son, a 1-year-old boy, and he was fatally wounded.
The SIU is investigating after a young boy is killed and 2 others seriously injured, including an OPP officer in the province's cottage country. Plus,
we're not as bad as we were, but we're not out of the woods yet in this matter.
Ontario health officials optimistic but cautious where we may be headed according to the province's new COVID-19 projections and the concerns that has experts warning it's not time to ease up just yet. And the owner of Adamson Barbecue arrested and charged after defying lockdown orders for a 3rd straight day. How it all went down on another day of protests and controversy. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. A 1-year-old boy is dead and 2 people, including an OPP officer, were seriously injured after a confrontation near Lindsay, just east of Peterborough. The province's police watchdog is now investigating.
Approximately 8:45 a.m., OPP officers were made aware that a father had abducted his son from the municipality of Trent Lakes. A short time later, officers located a vehicle of interest on Sturgeon Road and attempted to stop the vehicle.
During this attempt, there was a collision between the vehicle and an OPP cruiser and a civilian vehicle. An officer standing outside the cruiser was seriously injured. There was an interaction between the driver and the OPP. That's when 3 officers fired their guns. The 33-year-old man was hit and airlifted to hospital in serious condition. The SIU says a 1-year-old boy was inside the vehicle and died from a gunshot wound. But it says it's too early to say if the officer's gunfire led to the boy's death. The OPP officer injured in the collision is now in stable condition. To the pandemic now, Ontario reporting 1,478 new COVID-19 cases today and 21 more deaths. The province also released new modeling, the first time since Toronto and Peel went into lockdown. And while there are some positive signs, health experts are being very cautious. Angelina King reports.
Ontario's battle against COVID-19 described today as promising but not predictable.
While it may look like we're plateauing, we're still in a very precarious situation.
Ontario's advisory table says there is flattening in some regions, but the province certainly hasn't turned a corner yet. One big concern, ICUs. Hospitalizations have gone up by more than 60% in the last month, and ICU occupancy continues to increase. There are more than 150 people in the ICU right now, and the modeling suggests that number will be more than 200 next month, no matter the scenario.
And that's a challenge because that is above the threshold now at which hospitals are able to kind of cope with the surge in COVID patients. They are making decisions to cancel, postpone, or delay treatments that are necessary.
Long-term care deaths are also on the rise. There were 64 in the last week. More than 100 homes are experiencing an outbreak. The green line shows while deaths are climbing, the orange and yellow indicate cases have peaked and are coming down. This geriatrician waiting to see if that's a blip or a trend.
There's a long winter ahead of us, and many of the structural issues that make long-term care risks or make long-term care homes at such high risk still have not been addressed fully.
Looking ahead to the end of the year, the modeling shows if Ontario continues as is, the province will likely see similar numbers to now, around 1,500 new cases a day, well below the 4,000 to 6,000 that the modeling showed 2 weeks ago.
If, however, it goes in a very bad direction and we see from today on that type of growth that we were seeing 2 weeks ago, you'll see north of 9,000 cases.
The one big question, is the lockdown working?
It would state that the framework and the different restrictions are having an impact.
Dr. Williams says it's still too early to know how big that impact is. He also says there's no plan to implement lockdowns in other regions, although some may be moved to other zones. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Another key finding in today's modeling update is that one-size-fits-all health interventions aren't working in all communities. The advisory table says those who live in dense neighborhoods or work in essential services face greater risk of contracting COVID-19. To address this gap, the table says more accessible testing is needed, as well as eviction protection, paid sick leave, and income support. An expert from University Health Network says community members need to be part of this conversation.
These are lives at stake, and these are lives that have always been marginalized, that have been removed from the decision-making powers. If we don't ensure that changes, that flips, again, I think there's no way that we could be forgiven, given what we've known coming through wave one.
Dr. Buzari says community initiatives have been successful in helping to combat COVID-19, and he'd like to see more investment in those organizations. Also today, the Premier and the Minister of Education announced a boost in funding for schools in red zones. That includes Durham, Halton, Hamilton, and Waterloo. As Ali Chiasson explains, the money will go toward hiring additional staff and allow for asymptomatic testing.
We're providing additional funding to combat COVID-19 in schools in Durham, Halton, Hamilton, and Waterloo.
$13.6 million will be going to school boards in those regions, which are in the red zone, the second highest tier of pandemic restrictions.
That's $13.6 million more dollars, which will enable them to hire in between 135 to 175 additional teachers, or about 240 more custodians, or purchase over 27,000 tablets and laptops for their students.
This funding is in addition to $35 million the province announced last month, going towards school boards in Toronto, Peel, York, and Ottawa. It funds a new voluntary testing program for asymptomatic students and staff in these regions. NDP education critic Merritt Stiles says the money isn't flowing where it needs to, and not fast enough.
Parents are wondering why these dollars weren't spent right away to make sure that we could prevent outbreaks instead of just trying to contain it when it does happen. Invest in ventilation, invest in smaller class sizes, and if they'd done that, I think we'd be in a very different position today.
The latest development in school ventilation comes today. The TDSB sending a note to parents that, quote, Toronto Public Health is recommending that windows in classrooms should be opened for a period of time at different points of the day to introduce fresh air into the space and increase airflow. Please keep this in mind as your child gets ready for school each day by considering an extra layer of clothing to ensure comfort throughout the day. The education minister used the TDSB as an example of the success of their back-to-school plan.
250,000 kids, 99.9% are COVID-free. And I appreciate for each and every case that brings angst to a family, to parents, to the teacher. But we're doing something right.
The union representing elementary teachers of Toronto cited its own numbers from a survey of about 1,500 staff.
The fact that 96% of our teachers have never seen the public health in their school. That is huge. Teachers want to be a part of the recovery and the economy building. And so give us the tools necessary.
Currently, there are nearly 1,200 active school-related cases of COVID-19 in Ontario. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, first they changed the locks, then police brought out the handcuffs. Tense moments outside Adamson Barbecue. The Etobicoke restaurant has been the focus of anti-lockdown protests for the third day in a row. Today, supporters of owner Adam Skelly yelled at police after officers moved in to arrest him and make sure the restaurant stays closed. Greg Ross reports.
Police were at Adamson Barbecue just after 6 o'clock this morning to change the locks on the doors to the restaurant.
At 6 o'clock this morning, with the assistance of the city, the locks were changed at the premises, and all persons were restricted from access to the premises.
Owner Adam Skelly arrived just before 8 o'clock to find the parking lot blocked by police. After a brief conversation, police allowed Skelly to access the parking lot. Moments later, he punches a passcode into the back door and is able to gain access to the building. He's seen bringing food through the back door, presumably food he intends to sell.
During the process of him entering, they broke through the drywall and entered the restaurant proper.
I am healthy!
Throughout the morning, Skelly's supporters begin to arrive, gathering outside the restaurant. Inside, Skelly is seen trying to open the doors that have been locked by police. At one point, even putting out a call for a locksmith on social media. Just before 12:30, with Skelly still attempting to open, mounted police arrived. They stormed the restaurant to disperse the crowd, while other uniformed officers arrest Skelly, as well as another man who tried to intervene.
He faces 1 count of attempt to obstruct police, 1 count of mischief under. He also faces a count of failing to comply with a continued order under the Reopening of Ontario Act.
Police boarding up the windows to Adamson Barbecue tonight. They're also changing all of the locks throughout the entire building. As for Adam Skelly, he remains in police custody where he will remain overnight. He has a bail hearing tomorrow morning. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
One of the country's leading experts in forensic psychiatry was called to testify today at the trial of Alec Minassian, the man who carried out the Yonge Street van attack. Minassian admits he killed 10 people and injured 16 others, but is trying to convince the court he should be found not criminally responsible. As Trevor Dunn reports, the witness testified Minassian is not psychotic, but may have been impaired by his autism.
Dr. John Bradford is a renowned psychiatrist who has analyzed some of Canada's most notorious killers. In his 40-year career, he's been involved in the trials of Paul Bernardo, Robert Pickton, and Russell Williams. Bradford interviewed Alec Minassian at least 10 times in the months following the deadly van attack. He testified that Minassian does not have the most common mental disorder used to find killers not criminally responsible. He says Minassian is not psychotic. According to his examinations, Bradford says Minassian does have a level of moral reasoning. He's never been violent, Bradford testified, at any time other than this incident. What Bradford did notice in Minassian is ritualistic behavior. He says Minassian has fixed habits with mirrors and cutlery and holes in bread. And around 2008 or 2009, Bradford testified that Minassian became hyperfixated on mass murder. Bradford testified that this fixation drove Minassian to websites and chat rooms dedicated to mass murder and the people who commit it. He said Minassian was looking for online infamy and notoriety. He made statements to me that people would associate Yonge Street with Minassian in the future. Bradford said that Minassian's path to his rampage was influenced by symptoms associated with autism spectrum disorder. He introduced the concept of overvalued ideas, which he described as a false or exaggerated and sustained belief. While Minassian's actions may have been driven by these ideas, Bradford also testified that unlike psychotic delusions, Minassian may also have known that those ideas weren't true. The witness will now be cross-examined by the Crown. Trevor Dunn, CBC News, Toronto.
A Toronto police officer says she's faced retribution from fellow officers after she tried to stop her partner from assaulting a black suspect. The Iranian-Canadian officer says she endured years of racist and sexist attacks after coming forward. Now, she spoke to the Fifth Estate's Judy Trin about her human rights complaint against Canada's largest municipal police force and a warning some might find the details disturbing.
A growing number of female officers are refusing to stay silent about sexual violence within policing. In September, some even took their message to the skies. Daria, a Toronto policewoman, is the latest to join their ranks.
In my rookie night, a bunch of them are sitting on the table and they're drunk. They go, "Take your shirt off, start singing."
CBC is not using Daria's real name because she fears a backlash. She's been diagnosed with PTSD and hasn't been in uniform for 2 years. In her Ontario human rights complaint, Daria claims she was punched by her partner after trying to stop him from hurting a black suspect. Daria says her partner intentionally closed the squad car door on the man's leg.
I asked him to stop. He hit me in the chest really hard, that I end up having injuries.
After reporting the incident, Daria was called a rat. She alleges other officers abandoned her during volatile calls.
If you're not white, doesn't matter where you're a citizen or you're an employee, you don't have any right.
So what you're looking at are photos of pornography magazines. These magazines are in my workplace.
Effie Zarabi Madge knows what Daria is going through. This constable filed her human rights complaint against Toronto police in 2018.
The environment is so toxic, you're just constantly trying to survive. You can't thrive.
She knows it could be years before she gets a hearing, but Zarabi Majd is using social media to advocate for change now. She's posting photos and texts shared from a private police chat group, revealing racist and sexist behavior. Police have sent her a cease and desist letter, but she doesn't want to stop.
If you behave like this with your own colleagues, then do you turn it off when you go out and police the public?
Right now, more than 40 Toronto police officers are under investigation for sexual violence. 7 officers have been suspended with pay. In a statement, Chief James Raymer said he's committed to ending the misconduct. He has a personal stake in the matter. His daughter just joined the force. Judy Trin, CBC News, Toronto.
And remember, if you have a story you'd like us to look into, send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. When we come back, the machine that is literally saving lives during the pandemic, but demand is spiking and the treatment is in limited supply. Details coming up. Plus,
well, it's shaping up to be a sunny weekend, but a mixed Monday on the way. We'll have your full weather forecast after the break.
It's a COVID-19 treatment you might not be familiar with. ECMO circulates someone's blood through a machine, replacing the work of damaged lungs. Dozens of Ontarians have had the life-saving treatment during the pandemic, but it's in short supply. And as Lauren Pelly reports, there's concern over rising demand.
See where I can pick up some lights for all the little trees.
This Christmas will be a special one for the Passarelli family. Earlier this year, Tony fell ill with COVID-19 and almost didn't make it through.
They did some tests and they said, okay, you have ammonia, so we're decided to keep you, and then that's all I remember.
He ended up being in the ICU for weeks.
They told me that he may not make it, that he was very, very sick, and to be expected he may not make it through the night. So it was crazy, very crazy, overwhelming.
The whole family wound up sick, but Tony was the only one teetering close to death. Then, a last resort.
The physician was so pleased, as well I could hear in his voice, that he said he reached out to Toronto General for the ECMO.
ECMO is a form of life support, short for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. The treatment uses a machine to remove carbon dioxide, then sends oxygen-filled blood back into the bloodstream. Its goal is to replace the work of someone's lungs.
So even if someone has zero lung function, they still can survive if they are connected to the ECMO device.
Toronto General is the main Ontario hospital site offering this form of life support, with 30 machines available. But there's concern recent demand could prove hard to handle.
And now in the second wave, we have already put 12 patients, and most of them have happened in the last 2 weeks, which is the concerning part.
The current COVID-19 patients are using around a third of the available machines. The worry is if admissions keep rising, that could make it harder to juggle other needs like lung transplants.
It's totally dependent on having access to the right kinds of health professionals with the right kind of technology.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health told us it's not expected that the needs of patients with COVID-19 will impact the use of the therapy for other patients.
We were incredibly fortunate.
The Passarellis say time on an ECMO saved Tony's life, and they worry not everyone may have the same access he did if COVID cases don't drop.
People just have to follow the rules. They have to be safe, and that would eliminate like a lot of people getting sick.
Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Bolton.
A cloudy but mild night after above average temps throughout the day. Definitely a change from earlier this week. Let's go to meteorologist Nick Cernkovich, who has the full forecast for us. And Nick, we can expect more of this mild weather into the weekend, but it won't stick.
Hi, Caldo. Well, a bit of a mixed bag heading into the next few days. We've got some nice weather for the weekend, but Monday is the one to watch. Let's get right into the weather headlines here. Bit of a cloudy day for tomorrow. Also the risk of a bit of drizzle. We'll get to that in the forecast in just a second. A mild weekend and then a mixed Monday. It's really going to depend on where you are in terms of what you're going to see for precipitation. Today's temperature is hitting double digits at 11 degrees. Now, the average for this time of year, just shy of 5 degrees, so about double the normal for this time of year in the city of Toronto anyway. This came under generally cloudy skies. We're seeing that heading into tonight, but as temperatures drop, we are looking at some light patchy drizzle in some areas, and that's going to develop some fog as well across areas in southern Ontario. Look for that to dissipate tomorrow, but generally a cloudy day throughout the day tomorrow. Also looking at the risk for some patchy drizzle once more. Now, not a washout. We're not even talking about rain, but the potential for a little bit of wet weather tomorrow. That all clears out, though, into the weekend. By Saturday morning, we're looking at sunshine, and that sunshine sticks around from Saturday right through Sunday as well. It's Monday, though, where we've got to watch. There is another system that's approaching the region, and this is going to bring with it a rain-snow mix. And again, it's really going to depend on where you are, and we'll talk about that coming up in the 5-day forecast. For tonight, temperatures in southwestern Ontario around 4 degrees, fog patches, the risk of a little bit of drizzle in there as well. Tomorrow, highs a little cooler than today at 6-7 degrees, cloud cover, and the chance for some spotty drizzle as well. well. For the Golden Horseshoe, we're looking at temperatures around that 3-4 degree mark for the overnight period tonight. Some patchy fog as well and the risk of drizzle. And same story for tomorrow as well. Temperatures at about 5 degrees. Long range forecast looks like this. Again, the chance of a few spotty showers. Beautiful weekend at 6 to 9 degrees. But Monday, areas in the downtown core likely to see rainfall. But north of the 401, especially up toward Newmarket, it looks like it'll be largely a snow or rain-snow mix as we head through Monday. Tuesday, temperatures start to drop in the city of Toronto as well. Kelda.
All right, here we go again. Thanks so much, Nick.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
Finally tonight, there are deep sea divers, and then there are very deep sea divers. Now, those in the latter camp can perfect their skills indoors at what is, for now, the deepest diving pool in the world. Now, the pool is known as Deep Spot, and it's suitable for divers of all skill levels. Now, first you dive down 20 meters to the bottom of the main part of the pool. From there, you can continue your descent through a concrete tube that ends 45.5 meters below the surface. And more cautious divers can get a glimpse of the deep through an underwater viewing tunnel located inside the pool. A 50-meter deep pool is now being constructed in southeast England. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Dwight Drummond has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6, and I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.